UNC hires a new AD, but what does that mean for the future?
Off-season moves and conference realignment are always in the news, so we're back on the Big Mountain to keep you updated.
Hey, welcome back to the Big Mountain. I'm JY. This is my good friend Steve. We have some news coming out of the ACC. We want to talk about the news, but then what it might mean for conference realignment into the future. So July 1st here, it was announced that UNC had picked Steve Newmarket as the new athletic director of UNC Chapel Hill. He will, of course, succeed longtime AD Bubba Cunningham next summer. Cunningham will remain within the university as a senior advisor through 2029. That was after he signed a 2-year extension on that advisor deal. While hiring a successor here too, Cunningham is news. Maybe the bigger piece to this is kind of what we want to discuss here a little bit, just that continued dynamic between the UNC trustees and the UNC system. Remember back in January, Peter Hans, the president of the UNC system, suspended some of the UNC trustees' authority over athletics there at UNC Chapel Hill. This hire went through a quiet process, as they call it here, where the Chancellor Lee Roberts decided to make this hire without a search committee or any public process. A spokesman here for the university said that the chancellor has the authority to forego a search process for a high-level position when circumstances call for it, and they believed a quiet and deliberate process was the best fit. Both Chancellor Roberts and UNC System President Hans have signed off on this move. Beginning next year, summer of 2026, Cunningham will focus his efforts as a senior advisor wherever Chancellor Roberts instructs him to focus his time. So Steve, kind of thoughts on the process that they used here. We've talked about this interaction between the trustees and the system and the chancellor and all this stuff here several times. Let's talk about this first, and then we're going to get into some speculation about what it might mean for realignment. So what are your thoughts on the process?
Well, first of all, in regards to the new hire, there was some back and forth on Twitter. Is this the right guy?
Yeah.
Whatever. I have no idea if he's going to make a great AD or not. I do know he's a lawyer.
Yeah.
I do know some of his business sports background, being with a racing team and all of that. And let's face it, college athletics is basically becoming a big business.
Sure.
If it hasn't already. So that's really my only comment on as far as the new hire. Now, I do think it's incredibly smart for UNC to lock up Bubba Cunningham.
Yeah.
Yes, there were some, behind the scenes political battles. He got named and different things, different things they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of like, political house intrigue or whatever. But I think getting him locked up over the next 2 years is very smart as they transition to where they want to be over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Now, before I say, I'm going to hold my thoughts on where they want to be,
Yeah.
And then just talk about the process.
Yeah.
It really depends on your perspective whether you think that this was a good thing or a bad thing, okay? But to me, it's clear the steps that they've already taken, basically taking away powers from the Board of Trustee, the state system, the state Board of Governors, the chancellor, all of those high up decision makers have basically decided they're going to take the power away from the actual University of North Carolina because they want decisions made that are going to help all of the schools in the state system.
Yep.
They want to have their influence in there, so there isn't people that are just making decisions that are best for the UNC Tar Heels, but also NC State Wolfpack, the other state schools, the whole state. So whether you think that's good or bad, I mean, if you're a public, if you're an advocate of, open records, open meetings, things for a public school, you would look at this, well, this is bad. This was a bad process.
Sure.
They're taking away more power from the people who usually make decisions and putting it in just a couple guys, the old boys club, the smoke-filled room, and making those decisions. But on the other hand, if you're saying like, what can we do? How can we make the decisions again to not only benefit UNC Tar Heels but also NC State Wolfpack and all of those schools in the system? This is the move. This is the power move. Consolidating your power, making sure that your influence is felt throughout the whole process, so that you can guide this process forward over the next couple of years.
Well, and we've seen the system continually telling over the past year or whatever it's been, consistently telling the trustees to stay in their lane, to the point that the system said, we're taking these powers from you because you're overstepping your bounds. And, things that really should be the chancellor's thoughts, that what the chancellor's trying to do, they were overstepping that. And so it's interesting that, maybe one of the first big, at least athletic decisions that we're seeing here, hiring an AD, the trustees weren't involved at all.
And I would actually, and maybe you and I will disagree on this a little bit, I would actually say they didn't tell them to stay in their lane. I think, in my opinion, they completely redefined the lane because they didn't want that to be their lane. The lane that the trustees had been in for years, they decided, you know what, this is too big for the entire state. We're not going to let this small group of people have so much power. We're going to redefine the lanes of power, and we're going to control those lanes. But other than that, I think we're on the same page with this. They are, every step of the way, they're taking more power away from the local UNC Tar Heels Board of Trustees.
Right.
And if you combine it with, there was some other news today, it's not the topic of this conversation, but political news, new laws being passed, things like that. There is a, and I don't know if it's coordinated or whatever, but there's a major political effort in the state of North Carolina by the politicians, by the Board of Governors, who are, sent there by politicians, to basically look out for those programs and make sure that they're not taking chances. They're making sure their big public universities are set up for success in this new era of college athletics.
Well, that's what we know. Let's get into maybe some speculation about what it might mean for the future. Again, assuming that Notre Dame isn't going anywhere anytime soon, we've talked about that before. We continue to say, and I should say specifically continues to say, that FSU is the top target of the Big Ten, and UNC being the top target of the SEC. We've also talked a lot about the politics here, the geopolitical environment in North Carolina specifically. So what do you think this might mean for UNC and NC State, those two schools in particular, being kind of tied at the hip? I mean, I feel like that's what we're seeing. Maybe a little bit reading tea leaves, but I think what you saw here in terms of pulling the trustees out of the AD decision is very telling. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and as part of a process.
Sure.
This is just a continuation of a process that's been going on. And we've been clear on the show. I was clear from when we first started the show. Originally, UNC was a major target of the Big Ten. When Kevin Warren was the president, was the conference commissioner, even before him, Delaney, they were the next big target. They were going to be the crown jewel of building down the East Coast. UNC, the Tar Heels, that university, UNC Chapel Hill, they aligned really well with the Big Ten, the high academics, all of that stuff. But it became clear over the last couple of years that UNC, some of the decision makers, especially some of the new decision makers, would much rather see them not only in the SEC, maybe a better cultural fit, but also see them move to a conference that would be more likely willing to take both of them, UNC and NC State, which is definitely, I think, the SEC. And so I think all of the powers in the state of North Carolina, whether it's the governor signing legislation, whether it's their legislature basically giving direction to the Board of Governors and the Chancellor, all down, they are moving UNC and NC State, hopefully, in that direction, trying to align them where both of them will stay together. And it seems obvious to me, if the SEC decides to expand, that would be their destination. And for me, I've been clear all along, Florida State is now, especially with new Commissioner Tony Petitti, he wants to get in the state of Florida. They're looking at TV ratings above all else.
Sure.
SEC doesn't have to worry about TV ratings. They already have very high TV ratings, a lot of games. The Big Ten has to worry about that. So to me, this just solidifies what I've already said for a while. Florida State will be that target of the Big Ten. We'll see how the AAU status plays out. We've talked about that a ton.
Yeah.
I believe they'll get AAU status, but I don't think it's a deal breaker even if they don't.
Right.
And to me, again, this just solidifies the paths are starting to diverge.
Yes.
You could see them going either way. And to me, FSU, much more on a track headed towards the Big Ten. UNC plus, I'll call them little brother, NC State, tag along golden ticket, definitely seem headed towards the SEC, especially if the power brokers in the state of North Carolina get their way.
Well, and that's huge, and something maybe we've alluded to in the past but not talked about specifically is the fact that, you know, if the ACC is going to lose their top, 2, 3, 4 brands, which will set them back, separate them even more from the Power 2, if you're the state system, wouldn't you love to get 2 of your universities into the Power 2 as a package deal?
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you look at this from the UNC system, it makes sense to be like, well, if you want UNC, you're going to take them both. And that's an even bigger win for the state of North Carolina. And I think they're playing this really well if that ends up happening.
I mostly agree. I do think they're taking the risk of they're putting all or nothing approach in the SEC.
Sure.
Whereas there might have been a path where, you know, they could have said, you know, maybe if UNC gets invited to the Big Ten, maybe NC State gets invited and invites the SEC, and they could have had one nice egg in each different basket.
Right.
But I agree. Their strategy seems pretty obvious at this point, and if that's their strategy to get both of them in one conference, what they're doing is working perfect with that. Now, I do want to say overall, we talk a lot about these public universities, the different states. We talked about the state of Florida, and when they were going through this lawsuit with the ACC, I told you from the beginning, the politicians in Florida are going to figure out, and judges are politicians, they're elected politicians.
Right.
They were going to figure out a way to protect Florida State's best interest. We've never seen that really before.
Yeah.
You know, 10, 15 years ago, we saw the governor of Virginia step in to kind of keep Virginia and Virginia Tech together.
Right.
But we've never seen such a coordinated efforts at all levels of the politics in a state.
Yeah.
And I think we're really starting to see that in the state of North Carolina, in a very strong, and again, if that's their approach, they're doing a great job of it, like you said. And it makes me wonder, will we see this? Because I feel like we have another just big wave of realignment coming up between now and, let's say, 2031. Will we see other states start to do this, where they put it clearly that, okay, if you want this school, you're going to have to take another school, or you're going to have to make things happen so that the other schools benefit as well or are not hurt financially? Because most states, bigger states, have multiple state schools, multiple state system schools. We saw in California where they had to make payments to Cal Berkeley because UCLA was leaving. That was kind of a small baby step. For me, what North Carolina is doing, they're combining. They took what Virginia did, what Florida did, and what California did, and they're putting this together in one concerted, concentrated, I'll just say coordinated effort.
Absolutely.
And it seems like they're doing a good job of protecting interests. We'll see what the results are.
Right.
But it seems so far they're definitely on this path. They know what they want, and they're making it happen.
Absolutely. We're going to have to wait and see what the results are, and we're not guaranteeing any result. But clearly they have learned from past realignment.
Yeah.
And again, I think they're setting this up really well to get 2 universities into the Power 2. If that's what they're actually doing, which again, from an outsider's view, that looks like what they're doing. And if that's what they get, absolutely well played by the North Carolina system of higher ed there. Really, really well done. So, hey, had to give you guys an update. Been a little bit since we talked about the ACC and just kind of conference realignment in general. This was the time we could get back at that. So, hey, if you like what we do here, make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you pound the like button here on this episode. And we'll see you next time on The Big Mountain.